Welcome to the e-learning series, It's Not Just Weather, Understanding Plan 2014. This is part 1. Lake Ontario is human regulated. Many people have lived on Lake Ontario their whole lives and do not understand that Lake Ontario is regulated. On average, 85% of Lake Ontario inflow comes from Lake Erie, and Lake Erie is at record highs. Rain and snow melt make up the rest of the inflow, and that's the yellow area called the Lake Ontario Drainage Basin. The outflows into the St. Lawrence River is controlled by the Moses Saunders Dam in Cornwall. The Ottawa River joins the St. Lawrence River below the dam, so it is not part of the inflow into Lake Ontario. However, when the Ottawa River floods Montreal, Lake Ontario outflows are reduced to protect Montreal, and Lake Ontario rises rapidly. A 1-inch drop in Lake Ontario equals an 11-inch rise in the St. Lawrence River. The dam outflows are set and managed by the International Joint Commission, the IJC. The IJC is a binational organization established by the governments of the United States and Canada under the Boundary Waters Treaty of 1909. We're going to cover that treaty later on. The IJC's purpose is to help prevent and resolve disputes about the use and quality of boundary waters. Any changes to any regulation plan requires unanimous agreement from the 6 IJC commissioners. The current commissioners are found here. This makes these 6 people incredibly powerful with a very difficult job. So the math is actually pretty simple. When outflow does not keep up with inflow, Lake Ontario rises. Left unchecked, you can get a backlog of water in the system that can be very challenging to remove. Remember, outflow is controlled by humans under the new regulation of Plan 2014. This is not climate, it's policy. So how is Lake Ontario outflow determined? Well, it's through the regulation plan, Plan 2014. They calculate the lake outflows per a set of equations called rule curves. The outflow, which we've learned about, is dependent on the net total supply, the inflow, and the current Lake Ontario water level. Under high water supply conditions like we have now and like we had in 2017, they determine the maximum outflow permissible per something called the F limit. They determine the maximum outflow permissible per the L limit. So when you hear the language in the media that the IJC is letting out the maximum possible, know what that really means is the maximum permissible by the policy. There are 3 other limits that aren't relevant to this discussion. So they use the lowest of the above 3 values to set the weekly outflows. You're going to learn about the F limit and the L limit in Part 3 and Part 4. There are other considerations like ice management, which happens January to February. Outflows from Lake Ontario can be increased or decreased as conditions require for ice management purposes. A stable ice cover helps prevent unconsolidated ice from accumulating at narrow points and obstructions in the river and causing ice jams and associated flooding. This can be found on the IJC's website. So while the dam does not control the inflows into Lake Ontario, the outflows are controlled, and they're controlled by the policies set out in Plan 2014, which ultimately controls the lake level. There is nothing natural about the levels of Lake Ontario. Up next in the series, Part 2, Higher Highs, Lower Lows, and the Triggers.